Oh, finally. Okay, great. Now it's just taking the time.
Okay.
This used to not be
Right.
complicated. All right, so here we're going to YouTube. It is not going. I'm just gonna mute this out. Okay, cool. Let's see if cool. Goody. So here we're going to YouTube. All right, there we go. Let's just hit it. All right, so welcome everybody. I am live streaming this. If you want to be, I mean, you know, like I tell my students, so we have this fantastic honor and privilege of having Gary Bonn, and then Chloe is not feeling well, so she is with us via Zoom. And today he's going to read from his works and answer questions. So we have him for the whole class period. Gary Bonn has written a number of novels, internationally published. He's probably one of the best short story writers that I've come across, and just a wonderful human being all around. And Gary, I don't know if you want to say a few more words about yourself and then take it away.
I don't think I've ever been described as a wonderful human being, but that's fabulous. Well, I think you should all have a copy of the stories, that Clarendon House published. And I also think you have, and in that book is a story called The Boy on the Beach. You also should have a copy of a critique of that, which is very useful because it's somebody else's comments on my work. So, you know, what I'll do then is, if I can find it, it's down here somewhere, I'll read The Boy on the Beach, and you can look at the critique and, you know, see what you think. So here goes. Sunset, everything blood red. There's a little boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, standing on the beach, right at the point where crescents of foam reach his toes. I don't think my husband can see him. He hasn't reacted, though the boy is only a few meters away. The boy, long-haired and dressed only in a loincloth of seaweed, stares towards the horizon, holding his arms out, snapping his fingers with both hands, and talking in a susurrus voice, almost mimicking the sounds of the sea. His tone is light-hearted, even joyous. Switching to English, he looks back and flashes a huge smile at me. Hello, tell Ben to carry on down the beach. Say you want to sit on that rock and think for a while. I look at my husband. He's staring at me, confused. He says, what are you looking at? Why have you stopped? The boy continues singing, but interjects to speak to me. Please, you need to tell him to go on. It's best that we're alone for this. His tone is both authoritative and beseeching. Give him a kiss first, he adds. Turns and darts towards the cliff, scrambles up impossibly steep rock, and disappears among the trees. Back in a moment, he shouts down. Ben, leaning on his walking poles, says, are you all right, my dear? The wind whips his thinning but pointy beard, grey and white hairs flicked in the gust. Yes, I'm going to give you a hug and a kiss and sit here for a minute. You get ice creams. I'll be along shortly. His bushy eyebrows rise in mock horror. I'm not going to leave a pretty young lady alone on this wild beach. Anything could happen. Get the ice creams, you old fool. I plant my walking stick on the stone, lean forward and peck him on the cheek. Mine's wild ginger, raspberry if they haven't got that. A cone, one of those with a bit of chocolate at the bottom. Quick now, I have thinking to do. And what would you be thinking about? How would I know? I haven't had a chance yet. I'm having a thinking moment. Get on with you. He jerks his beard to point along the beach. Ginger or raspberry? Message received and understood. He totters away. Really, we're too old to be walking on uneven surfaces. But we have both aged without grace, kicking, fighting and screaming against the rebellion of our bodies. He's unstable as I watch him disappearing into the dusk. We shouldn't have come this far from the promenade. But neither of us have ever been sensible. We're so close, so similar, two aspects of the same person. I love that man so much. A sound makes me turn. The boy is back on the beach. In those insufficient moments, he's collected firewood, thin sticks, kindling, and what looks like a nest of dry grass. He's squatting down and talking to the grass in his hands. It's like I'm hearing half a conversation in a foreign language. His voice laughing, chiding, coaxing, and chuckling in turns. A ghost of smoke rises from the nest like a pirouetting dancer, thickens, and a tiny flame erupts, followed by more. Within seconds, the boy has a small cone of twigs alight on the sand and piles sticks over them. He turns, winks at me, and dashes among the breaking waves. Reaching into the water, he sings, laughs again, and straightens up while lifting two lobsters. Returning to the fire, he kneels, places the lobsters on the sand, and strokes them once on the head. They stop moving. Dismembering and cleaning them with his fingers, he places the tails on sticks over embers and the rest around its base. All the time, he's busy singing, whistling, and talking to things or people I can't see. I seat myself on the rock and study him. He's busy and doesn't seem inclined to talk to me. I'm fascinated. He's not human, that much is obvious. Everything I've ever seen has clearly recognizable states, but his are ephemeral. One moment he's so insubstantial I wonder how it is I can't see through him. In another, appearing beyond massive, as if he could walk through rocks and they would have to shatter around him. In the end, I'm so mystified, I ask, "What are you?" He sniggers. "Oh, humans, humans. I remember now your need for names and categories and the illusion of knowledge and the even greater illusion of control. I have no category. Nothing has. I am me. If you are not, okay, how do you differ from a human? If I were to tell you that we'd be here for eternity, you'll find out soon enough. In hopefully a nice way. That's the plan." He rocks back on his heels and hugs his knees. "I used to be a human." "What is this about?" I ask. "I haven't much time." He leaps up and kneels before me, his hands on my knees. "Time is not a problem. Just trust me. It's not. Don't worry about Ben for the moment. Concentrate. I'll take you through this, but I can only think of one way without tangling you up in confusion and distress." He looks into my eyes. "So I want to tell you something, things, but don't be frightened. We're nice. The first is that we prey on humans. All any of us do is destroy humans." "Why?" I tense, fingers tightening on my stick. "Are you praying now? Are you going to destroy me?" "Only the human bit, what's left of it. Gods, I wish I'd had someone to help me through it." He strokes my knees. I ask, "Are you going to kill me?" He may look like a child, but frankly, there's no way I could stop him. Just look at the way he scrambled up the cliff and carried a huge pile of wood. I could cry out, but I feel so calm. He winks at me. "Yes, I look like a child, but that's not the whole story. The important bit now is that I'm in your mind, reading your thoughts and slowing them down, blocking others, so you ask the right questions. I'm doing this with all the intelligence and love I can muster. Afterwards, we can talk about it and see if there is a better way. You're going to need to do this, what I'm doing now, very soon. This is my first time." He sighs. "Yes, a child. I was a human child. I loved being a child. Then I grew into an adult and it all went wrong. I tried to be what everyone wanted, what society expected and encouraged me to be. Too many conflicting pressures, all claiming to be the most important. And somehow I failed to pick up sufficient wisdom and a thick enough skin to deal with them. The result was a malformed, twisted, grotesque, a poisonous homunculus. I was revolted by the man I became. I didn't admire or trust him, and I had to be him." He pats my knees, rises and turns back to the fire. He calls, "If I remember rightly, I killed myself." "You're dead?" You committed suicide? Yes, I only killed the adult. I kept the best bit. There are so few benefits to being human. Keeping the best bits is one, family ties another. There are friendships too, but you get all of these things anywhere. It's hard to find any point in being human at all. He turns the sticks and other pieces of lobster. Do you like mackerel? There are some close. I could call them. 1,000 questions in my mind seem to evaporate. Yes, something is messing with my head. But for all that's happening, I remain tranquil and able to think clearly. He looks back to me, pulling hair into a ponytail to clear his face. He ties it with a strip of semi-dry seaweed, fragments tumbling from it. I love you. He lets those words hang for a moment. We go into people's heads, hearts, bodies, and destroy everything we can. It takes a lot of us and a lot of effort. Why do humans even exist? Is there any point to them? He stands, pushing a lobster claw with his toes. Nothing suffers anything like humans do. Nothing is so ignorant and out of control, and so removed from reality. He looks at me, head tilted to one side. Tell me, what's the point? Did you ever find a point? Are you really going to kill me? I close my eyes. Why did I close them? Did he make me? No, I'm going to feed you. Look around. Opening my eyes, I see the beach has changed. This is a different place, and the sun is just rising. The colours are unworldly. It all smells different. Scents I can't identify. The air feels thicker. I've been here before. Some fleeting memory. I stand, my stick falling away. I don't need it. That's a shock. I'm strong again, stable. I'm dead? No, you're alive. Just this moment, born again. It will take you some time to readjust, but you're free now, instantly. Don't worry about Ben. He'll cope. And I have news of him. He watches me for a while. What can you see? My panic regarding Ben is suppressed, along with more questions. A strange but familiar place. Another planet? Just that, just one place. You've a long way to go yet then, but that will come. He turns the lobster tails. These are nearly ready. How do you like them? Walking over to me, he takes my hands. Maybe you'll change into a child like me, or stay as you are, or become, let's go for stupid names and categories while you still think like that. Siren, Selkie, Huldra, Demon, Angel, Fairy, anything, so you can free humans from torment, cancer, car accidents, aging, anything. You don't realize it, but without us, you'd all be trapped in hell forever. He tips his head to one side. Did I do all right? Was the transition painless enough? He stares into space. I think I got you through it all right. You're free now and I love you. I'm also going to stop meddling with your thoughts. Brace yourself. You're on your own now, he grins. Momentarily, my mind is swamped with released thoughts fighting for attention. I dismiss them. Now I see his face clearly. Arthur? I choke out a sob, fist pressed against my mouth. He grins. Hello, Mum. Yes, I left hell. You've reminded me of how humans think, and my departure must have brought you great distress. For that, I'm so sorry. But it was all getting too ugly. However, at least it meant I'm here for you now. Look, we need to work out if there's a better way to do what I just did. You're going to be the best one to field Ben. We're working on him. He's going to be freed soon. He hugs me. Come and eat. Okay. Oh, did that sound all right?
I think you have a great reading voice. I mean, you were talking about him doing an Audible book earlier. Yeah, does anybody have questions for Gary or comments on the story? I know you just heard it. It's in your course readings too, the PDF. Don't be shy.
Yes, don't be shy.
I think it was amazing.
He said, I don't know if you can hear Mario said he thinks it was amazing.
Well, thanks.
That's how so.
Oh, I think it was very vivid, and you can definitely like picture yourself being within it and basically feel what that woman was feeling and everything. So I liked it.
Did you get a lot?
Yes, I did. I mean, would you like me to go through it and tell you what I was doing as I was writing it? That might be very useful. Let me pick it up again. I've
Yeah.
lost it. Oh, here we go.
They say yes. Or they're not,
Sorry?
they're nodding their heads yes.
Okay, right.
And I can display it if that's not too disruptive. Oh, it's up to you.
Sorry.
I said I could.
Yes, you
display
can.
the story.
You can do whatever you think's right. Okay.
You want me to
Right,
go through the
opening.
critique with them as you go through it, or do you want me to show them do you want me to go through the story itself?
Well, I can do that, or we can go through the critique made
You
of
wanna do
it.
the critique, whichever you wanna do, because I can display both.
Okay, well, let's do the critique, shall we? Because that's another person's head looking at my writing. Okay. Okay, it states, Bonn is an expert at written impressionism, the art of setting a scene using minimal wordage. And the beginning is that sunset, everything blood red. There's a little boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, standing on the beach, right at the point where crescents of foam reach his toes. I don't think my husband can see him. He hasn't reacted, though the boy is only a few meters away. Well, in that, yes, the scene setting is absolutely critical. Almost all the time. In some things, scene setting is not needed at all. However, we're talking about people here and spatial distance, time of day, and we're also making it visual because, crescents of foam touching his toes and so on. So I hate to use the phrase show and tell. It makes me want to scream. What I'm doing there is getting the reader to see or to sense something, and the crescents of water and the toes, and that pulls them into the story. And that is how you make a reader become immersed in the story. It's about feelings, and senses. So how something feels, how it looks, how the wind feels on your skin, but it's also about emotions, how you feel inside. You have many senses. There's proprioception, for instance, so the sense of nausea. All of these things you feel, and you can help the reader feel them too, and that gets them immersed. So in that beginning, it is just a few words, but beginnings are absolutely critical. Right then. Now I have a description of the boy, long-haired and dressed only in a loincloth of seaweed. That's all the reader needs, because they can grasp that. He doesn't need any more description at the moment. He stares towards the horizon, holding his arms out, snapping his fingers with both hands, and talking in a susurrous voice, almost mimicking the sounds of the sea. There again, I'm making sensations, and using visual stimuli. Where are we? He's doing something mysterious, and the mystery started right in the first few lines. I don't think my husband can see him. So this boy's doing something strange. He's dressed in a strange way. He isn't seen by the husband. And he's talking in a strange language. It's all very strange. This is to pull the reader in through wanting to find out what's going on. Right there, where are we? Yes, so the husband can't see him. The boy continues singing, but interjects to speak to me. Please, you need to tell him to go on. It's best that we're alone for this. So another mystery has landed on the poor reader. If you do this too much, the reader is going to withdraw. You have, if you give the reader a mystery, you have to do something with it, or the reader's going to be really upset and feel betrayed. Where are we then? Oh, here we go. Part of the critique. Just when the scale of uncertainty might tip us into rejection, Bonn quickly fills in a few details, setting us up with Ben and his wife as playful seniors on a harmless trip on the beach. Ben, leaning on his walking pole, says, are you all right, my dear? The wind whips his thinning but pointy beard, grey and white hairs flicked in the dust. So we've, I've diverted the reader from all the mystery. Nothing's answered yet, but the reader has a break from it all, Right then. Our protagonist hints that things may have gone a little too far, but balances this with comforting, warm words. We shouldn't have come this far from the promenade, but neither of us have ever been sensible. We're so close, so similar. Two aspects of the same person. I love that man so much. So this is about emotion. You're getting the reader to feel that connection between two people, the love. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when you are in a very, very close relationship, particularly if you've been in it for years, the relationship sort of becomes a sphere. There's you at one side, the other person on the other side, and it's the relationship that more or less defines you. It changes you. Yeah. So where are we? I want to put that point in because this is her son talking to her. Okay, he's messing with her head, so she doesn't notice it at first, but there is that relationship as well, which gets revealed. Get the reader to understand the connections between people. This is very important. Okay, all the time he's busy singing, whistling and talking to things or people I can't see. And the reader, again, is brought back to the mystery. Where are we now? And he's obviously not human. Sorry, I didn't quite get what you said there.
Sorry, the next part says, I seat myself on the rock and study him.
Yeah. That really is just a small passage to emphasize and move, emphasize mystery and move things on. And it ends with, what are you? It's the reader's question, but she's asking it. The boy's answer is a kind of mini manifesto for Bond's writing. Well, I didn't read that bit before. I remember now your need for names and categories and the illusion of knowledge and the even greater illusion of control. I have no category, nothing has. I am me. I'm taking a stab at our perception of reality, which is more or less based on, it comes from Newton, the philosopher Kant, and Einstein. It's a perception that is being challenged very hard in physics at the moment, and it's the opposite of reductionist thinking. So he's saying, I am me. And the way you think is very human, but you don't need it. There are other ways to perceive. So you did ask me about research. And I mean, I love philosophy. I've studied it for goodness knows how many years. And it gives, that sort of knowledge gives you confidence as a writer. And that confidence is transmitted to the reader. So you might just touch the tip of an iceberg, but when you've researched something, when you know something, if you're talking about you, anything you know lots about, it does transmit to the reader. They can feel your confidence. Right then. The important bit now is that I'm in your mind, reading your thoughts and slowing them down. And the comment here is, hypnotized like our heroine by the strange boy. We as readers have no alternative but to proceed. But then Bond does something even more interesting. He outlines the growth of ironic culture in all of us individually. I'm not sure I'd completely understand that, but there you go. And the boy goes on to explain that he was a human. He enjoyed being a child, hated being an adult, and killed himself. And that's something I've noticed throughout my life. We are all children. We think of ourselves as adults, but actually we are children with coping mechanisms and a sort of facade of adulthood. And those people who hang on to that child and in themselves, and how do I put it, and look after it and nurture it, are how do you put it? Yeah, less lost, less twisted. And where did he say something about how modern adulthood twists the child, but it twists the child within us into a parody of itself? Well, that's very Jungian, isn't it? Right. Anyway, moving right along. Otherwise, we're going to run out of time. Where are we? Dying isn't losing meaning in this world, it's gaining it. Right, so this is the criticism, that the death here is a freeing. It's an ironic ending, but it's also I forget the phrase actually. Is it epic? Where you end up with it looks like it's going to be a disastrous ending, but it turns out good. So she's dying, but she's freed from what the boy describes as hell. And she's also given a hint by saying, I can only see this new world you've brought me into. The boy says, well, actually, there's a lot more, and you're going to discover it. So the readers had all the mysteries, near enough all the mysteries answered. And then they're being offered more, there is much more. And you can actually come back as, and he lists Selkie, that's a Scottish seal stroke human. They are noted for rescuing people. In particular, they protect women who are abused by their husbands. That's a very Selkie thing. Huldra is a Swedish monster Look them up, they're scary. Demon, angel, fairy, anything so you can free humans from torment. So yes, become a magical being and cause car accidents, aging, anything. You don't realize it, but without us, you'll be trapped in hell forever. He grins. Hello, Mum. Yes, I left hell. You've reminded me of how humans think, and my departure must have brought you great distress. For that I am so sorry, but it was all getting too ugly. As the emotional wave, back to the critic, as the emotional wave washes over us, the author invites not contemplation, but objective participation. I'm not sure I totally get that, actually. This critic has a huge intellect. Right then. And finally, pulled out of what we thought was reality, we are not left to either think or feel, but are asked to partake. In this way, Bond secures his legacy as a master author in one just short story. Whoa, well, there you go. Wow. Dear. I think this guy liked the story. Okay, so you get to see some of how my brain was working as I wrote that story. And again, going back to research, I do look at current philosophy, perceptions of reality. This is what my writing is about, challenging paradigms and so on, and suggesting that actually there's a huge amount out there, fighting over land, color, gender, politics, religion, and this is actually nonsense. There is far more out there, and we should be exploring reality and not fighting amongst ourselves. Anyway, to go back to basics, basics are incredibly important. In martial arts, it's the big statement is a master is someone who understands the basics. And so let's make you master writers, shall we? And then you can tell me what to do. Right, it's about the reader. This is the core of everything when you're writing. You have to be in the reader's head. You are getting in their head and you're messing with it. You're lying to them. You're saying, this is a world and it's real, and I'm going to make you live in it for a while. So you've got to really be good at getting into someone's head, knowing how they think, and manipulating them in a good way, hopefully in a nice way. So again, going back to openings, you have so much to build into that opening. You have to grab that reader, give them a mystery or someone needing something, something that's lost, anything. There has to be a motive in there, something the reader wants to have sorted out, and they need to be set in place. I mean, Edgar Allan Poe would have stormy clouds, crows in the trees fighting, that sort of thing, to set a scene. That's very poetic, but pull the reader in, set the scene, and make them feel and see physically what's going on, and feel emotionally how the protagonists are interacting, feeling, so on. So it's all about the reader. Really, that's all you need to know. If you want to be a great writer, just be the reader and write the book, the story, what have you, that you feel needs to be written. If you want to be a great writer, just write what you think you want to write. Simply because if you try and write, I mean, it's perfectly okay to write standard thrillers, romances, that sort of thing. They're wonderful, and people need them. But there are limits to those genres, which are sometimes hard to break out of. There are lots of rules and fashions in writing, everything from use of I read some lecture notes that were written in the United States, and in it was a statement, roughly 37% of the way through the book, there has to be a pinch point, and there has to be another one at 78% through the book. And I thought, this is absolute nonsense. Don't tell writers what to write. Tell them how to write, sure, but not what they should do, because they're artists and they're going to break rules, and anyone that follows the rules is being constrained. So there are rules out there are fashions out there. Go with them if you want to be a highly commercial writer. On the other hand, if you want to be a Kafka, just do your own thing. Right then, I've talked about authority. Now, here's a good one. There's a book going to be published soon, and it's the result of an accident I had, in which I was injured and couldn't move for weeks. So I was basically on a sofa for some weeks, and I've entered this world. I went and I worked in it. I met the people, I worked with them. I was each of them in turn. How to put it, I got blisters from the work. I had dust in my eyes. I was cold, I was too hot. I was really there for some weeks. That is world building, because then you've lived there, you've been the people, you've set a situation, and having done that, you can then just let the people do the story for you. They'll write the story. They will interact and do their own thing, and you will get to an end eventually. It's a great way to write. It's called pantsing. You may have heard of it. There's plotting, where people have worked out the entire book, and in which case they've done all their work before they start writing, if you like. And there's pantsing, where they write the book and then afterwards they have to come back to sort it out. So there's a lot of work either way. I also want to go back to writing the way you want to write, you being the artist and you being in control. I was so lucky when I came across Clarendon House, the publishers, because I had worked out that using short stories, they are quite difficult, short stories, but each of them can carry a gem. And so in the first, I wrote 10 anthologies. Effectively, they're one work, because you meet the people again and again in subsequent short stories. They mix. Do you see where I'm getting? That each of those short stories is effectively a chapter of a bigger book. I might write the 11th, but think I've said everything I need to. What I'd like to do is go back and edit some of my other books, my older books, and hopefully, cross my fingers, have them published by Clarendon, so all my work is there. That would be lovely. that's really everything I would want to say, although I could expand on any of that ad nauseum. But do you have any questions?
Yeah, this is great. We have talked about the pantser versus the plotter, which I think is fascinating. I thought you were a plotter. I'm actually surprised. But I'm sure you do a lot of great work afterwards. But anyway, no, it's not about me, it's about them. I'll say my question. Do you have other, and Chloe, you too, if you want to either unmute or post a question in the chat. Do you have any other questions for Gary?
How do you deal with writer's block?
I have never encountered it. It can, I've spoken to people who claim they have writer's block, and almost invariably it's because there is some glitch, plot hole, whatever you want to call it, in their writing. In other words, they've derailed themselves, and a typical example is the ending doesn't work. And there was a writer, Stephen Godden, who wrote, and you may find this book absolutely wonderful. Let me type this in here. What's it called? Tales of the Genre. Okay, now he told me that if you have a problem with an ending, it's because you've got the beginning wrong, and that is just wonderful. And so when I've spoken to people who have writer's block, I mean, sometimes it's another issue, but there's a fault in their writing, and they don't know quite how to deal with it. So it's a case of going there and structurally analysing their story and what's going on with it. And invariably, I mean, they're artists, they're creators, they will get around that situation. It's quite handy to have a very close friend whom you trust with your work, who can, look at the structure. It takes a great deal of skill to look at the structure of something, but you get that skill actually quite quickly. You just read one or two books and you've more or less grasped what's going on. So back to writer's block. In most cases, it is something like they can't work out the ending because they've got the beginning wrong. The two have to match. They have to work with each other. There is a wonderful piece of research. I listened to a lecture on YouTube about this. Can I find it again? No. But it was it's just so frustrating because so many people should watch it. But I'll tell you, it's about creativity and being blocked, not being able to come up with new ideas, not being able to resolve a problem. It was done in Denmark, where, or it could have been the Netherlands, can't remember, where it is typical to make a sandwich in the morning. It's not a sandwich as we know it. It's like a piece of bread with some peanut butter or chocolate or something on it, which is peanut butter with chocolate sprinkled over the top. Now, what these artists, creators, musicians, choreographers, the whole lot were asked to do was make that sandwich upside down. What happens there is you completely frazzle your brain. There were lots of other things. I mean, just spend the morning not walking forwards, always walking sideways or backwards. Anything to completely, it's like rebooting your head. if you like. And the effects are quite extraordinary. It's quite handy to have someone who knows about this sort of thing. And you say, well, look, I'm not getting through this block, if you like. And they'll suggest something absolutely weird that you then have to do. What happens is the problem people say, oh, I'll put it in the back of my head, but that's precisely what's going on. In scans, you have a problem that you can't resolve, but you're determined to resolve it. It literally goes to the back of your head where it's dealt with. And then some hours later, it's actually quite predictable. I think it was like 11 and a half hours later, something like that. This area heats up, and then another area, I think it's sort of up here, I'm not sure. Suddenly that heats up, and then you have the answer. You can actually see it all happening on the scan. It's extraordinary. So there are two ways of dealing with writer's block. As I say, I don't have it. I sometimes get terribly bored of writing, in which case I just don't write. I go and make a sword, or make a skirt, a Bronze Age skirt for a friend or something like that. And then that refreshes me, and I go back to writing. Does that help?
Yeah, and in fact, I very rarely get writer's block too. And the one time I did, I changed the gender and the point of view of the novel, and that actually pushed it forward to completion. But I like this idea, even that little snippet of when you get bored of writing or tired, it's okay to do something else creative. I mean, it's not going to be a permanent vacation, right? I don't know how long it takes you to make a sword and then come back to it, because I think that happens too, But I know that's really great. I'm gonna be looking up for that YouTube video. That's a great question. Any other questions for Gary?
What genre do you struggle with the most?
He asked what genre you struggle with the most.
Most of them. I suppose that when I was a writer for Fire Dance books, oh grief, that was like going into a cauldron, into a forge. It was really intense. One of the things they wanted me to do was write in as many genres as possible. I struggle with horror. Hey, tell you what, great quote from my wife, Gary, write what you know. So give romance and eroticism a miss, will you? So yeah. Where are we? Horror, erotic writing. I've edited an absolutely fabulous book, which has only been published in Czechoslovakian, I think. It was originally written in English. It's about vampires, written by a woman who lived as a gypsy in her teens. These gypsies just travel through countries. They don't understand boundaries and what have you. And they have these fabulous vampire stories. And so she just wrote a brilliant vampire story, which is outrageously erotic. So I was editing it, and for the first time I realized that you can have eroticism in literary fiction. I mean, it was it was blatant, written in extreme detail that I would never do. I just don't have the guts for that. But it was brilliantly done. So yeah, I struggled with that. How about you? What genres do you struggle with?
Romance.
So he's the romance. I totally agree, romance. How about Mario and Chloe and Michael, what do you,
Yeah, romance and
Michael says romance too,
horror as well.
horror, yeah, Mario, horror. How about you, Chloe? Chloe actually loves writing a romance.
Yeah, I like romance. I hate horror.
Me
Um,
too, Gary, I wish I could write horror. I read it, I very rarely get scared, but whenever, it depends on the reader too, some of them think my stories are scary. But I end up writing like supernatural thrillers, you know,
well, I've seen, you know, your story that you were developing about what was it, a nail shop. I must get
Nail
this.
Shop Warrior.
Yeah, there was so many bits of that. It just pulled me in so hard. It was fascinating. You know, really, really wonderful concepts. Yes, the idea of nuns doing nails, and they're also fighters with an agenda. And I'm going, wow, beautifully done. Now,
Do you still struggle with the horror genre, or have you like perfected that? Or I don't know if there's perfection is such a terrible word. Have you gotten better at it?
me,
Yeah.
I don't know. Do I even want to write horror? I don't know. I mean, yes, I could. I feel uncomfortable doing it because, you know, as a writer, you are feeling what's going on. So people who write torture scenes, you know, to get a torture scene right, you actually got to sort of live through it. No, really, I'm not sure about that. I could have a go. I mean, some of what I write is quite horrifying, but it's not intended to be, if you like. What I could do, and this is, you know, an offer to you people who have come here, if you want to send me bits of your work, I would be delighted to take a look and make comments and critique. If you're feeling strong, very strong, I could do a fire dance critique. In fire dance, the best editing I've ever seen. It's merciless. The editor will go through your work, your entire work, and tear it to shreds, everything they possibly can, every possible weakness, ambiguity, lost attribution, anything too vague, anything boring, anything that doesn't work for a reader. I mean, you get it back and you realize this person has put something like 20 hours into your book, and you, as a result, you know, they're doing it because they respect you and they love that book and they want it to succeed. But when you look at it, you think, oh no, it's awful. But the ultimate caveat is you're the captain in control of that ship. You can look at these structural edits, copy edits, even proofreading, and say, actually, no, that's not what I want. You know, I'm not going to do what you say. There was Patrick Leclerc wrote a great novel with the ending written right at the beginning, and he was put under so much flack for having done that, that he almost gave in and changed it, but ultimately he said, no, this is the way it's got to be, and I totally agreed. So where was I going with that? I seem to have lost the thread.
Back and you own your own writing, which I think is right on point. I mean, we were just having a discussion yesterday about an illusion in one of the students' story, And I said to him, it's your work, keep it how it is, like, what do you do when an illusion may be obscure to a reader? But then he rightly pointed out, they could look it up. It's all like, not like we don't have the internet and Google, right? But I love that. I love this whole idea of you're the captain of your own ship. I guess my question is, where do you have this philosophy that you treat your editor like God, but then you're the captain of your own ship. How do you balance that out? You know what I mean?
Well, if you read the the editor's reports, if you like, and they are merciless. They're meant to be. You can go through it and ignore. You can ignore a lot of it, but occasionally you'll come across something major or minor and think, actually, that's right. I do need to make a change. I remember editing one chap's book. And I said to him, those 3 chapters have got to go. They're rubbish. they just don't do anything. And he was horrified at first. But ultimately, he did drop those 3 chapters. And the book was very much more robust as a result. And he was pleased. But it's a dreadful thing to say to someone, isn't it? I think the most hilarious editorial comment I ever had was, oddly enough, about the book that I'm editing, my own book that I'm editing at the moment. And the comment was, "Oh, I love this character. I'm so glad she's back in and active, but didn't she die in chapter 4?" So yes, highly embarrassing. That was a cut and paste error there. Another one was the word count is 130,000. That's too big. You've got to cut it out. Actually, if you take the word fuck out, it'll be down to 40,000. So yes. So if you would like to pass me some of your work for me to look at it, I will try to be useful to you. Ultimately, I want to go back over the major points. It's about the reader. Be in the reader's head. You have something to say. You are the captain of that artwork. And if you know what you're doing is good and right, nobody can change it, okay? Be confident. Writing is hard, but anyone who is committed can do it. It's that commitment and hanging on in there. And I mean, it took me 10 years before people really started noticing my work. I hopefully this series of 10 books, I think they're called the collected works. I prefer it if Clarendon would change that to the signature anthologies or the signature work, because effectively it's one huge book. Unfortunately, it's 10 books. And I don't know what the price is in the States, but over here, to buy all 10 books, it's going to cost someone £100. That's dreadful. So maybe we could do something with that. I don't know. Where are we now? We've done openings, we've done rules and fashions. And does anyone have any questions at all, but particularly basic questions, because the basics are the most important part of any art.
How do you handle criticism? Because I know that you're like a notable writer. Have you ever had like work that's been like turned down by publishers and editors? And how did you not like take offense to that, I guess?
was younger then and more vulnerable, more sensitive. Criticism and rejections were constant disappointments. Not only rejections, but people just not responding. That's common too. In those days, could you believe it? You actually printed out the entire thing and sent it to them in parcels. We're talking before the internet was very effective. I mean, a book in Word is something like 1.2 megabytes. Fortunately, there are better platforms such as OpenOffice, but in those days, it was really too big to send. These days it's nothing. Anyway, so you got your manuscript back and you went through it. You're thinking, well, what's wrong with it? Because most of the time you don't get any feedback, and most of the time it's because it's too different. It's too original. It doesn't fit within a particular genre. It's about, can they sell this book? Is it going to make money? And a lot of my work was never intended to make money. It's just turned out that way. It was intended to say something to people. Yes, it hurts, but don't take it seriously. Be confident, be that captain, and just let it go. How do you cope with it? Chloe, how do you cope with rejection?
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, I take into what they're saying or whatever feedback they're saying into consideration, and then I'll see what I could do to work on that, I guess. But yeah.
And they may say something which is useful, to which, and you will agree. What you don't, I mean, rejection is awful. Most of the time, it's not about the quality of your work. It's about, is it marketable? In fact, nearly all the time. So that rejection is not a reflection of the quality of your stuff. I think I've said that before. Where are we with this? Stay confident and just hang on to knowing that you're doing what you know to be right. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm just repeating myself there. Have you any more questions?
I think it's great, Gary, and I think that's what people are afraid of, rejection, and it's right. When an editor doesn't say why you left, like, wondering, but I just dust off and resubmit it somewhere else. And more often than not, it's another, I mean, I used to also think about quote unquote great writers who had their books rejected numerous times until they found either a publishing house or an agent who would take their work. And now they're bestsellers. And so I think you just kind of grow thicker skin the more you go through it, Other questions for Gary?
What inspires him to write? Like,
Oh,
what is his...
beautiful. I thought somebody would ask this. What inspired you to write?
Well, I started off life as an artist, as in painting, illustrating, that sort of thing. I decided that my art was absolutely rubbish. Technically, it was okay, but it wasn't doing anything, wasn't saying anything. I regarded myself as, quite accurately, as naive and ignorant. So I dropped art and went into, I wanted to learn about life, about people. So I became a nurse. I wanted to look at, I wanted to deal with people being born, people suffering, being cured, dying, whatever. I wanted very much the reality of what it is to be a human, because I didn't really know. And then I went into psychiatric nursing, again to explore, that side of things. Having come out of that, I went into a massive amount of research and ran a company teaching people, apparently, well, ostensibly, teaching people hunter-gatherer living skills, from hunting, making food, glue, makeup, musical instruments, from stuff around them, what have you. But actually, I was teaching these social skills of hunter-gatherers, which are, I could go on about that forever, just shut me up. The social skills of hunter-gatherers are unbelievable. They everything is about conflict resolution, kindness, sharing, that sort of thing, and that's how they cope with being human, because we are dangerous animals. Where was I? And I wanted to take some of those skills, put them into characters, and use what I'd learned about life, my study of philosophy and so on, so that I could challenge the way that people see the world, see each other, and see themselves. Not that I'm saying, oh, you should think this instead. No, it's like, you see the world this way. Is that right? Are you sure about that? What about this? There are other things out there. But reality is much, much bigger than we're taught it is. In fact, there's a brilliant phrase in a Douglas Adams book where an old woman looks out the window of an airplane and sees, a jet plane, and sees two people having sex on the wing. And she says to herself, everything I've ever been told is wrong. And that, there is that wonderful feeling as you grow older, and you can look at the way that you were taught to see reality. You think, well, actually, that's wrong. That's rubbish. There are lots of ways to see it, and then none of them are right, which is what I've built into those 10 books. Well, none of them are right. It's better to say none of them are wrong.
Gary, one question that come up, and I know you said write what you know, but have you ever written about a place where you haven't been to, or try to capture a dialect that you weren't as familiar with in your stories?
Yes, I have. I've written about imaginary worlds, obviously, and how do I put it? Yes, I've written, for instance, I wrote about a book which ends in the finale in the Callanish Stones on the island of Lewis, west coast of Scotland. It's a stone circle, much older than, say, Stonehenge. It's absolutely beautiful, but I wrote about it, and then I thought, no, this is rubbish, so I had to go there. Again, it's about research. I had to go there and be there.
You literally went to the place.
Sorry?
Went to the place to experience it.
Yeah, for instance, I mentioned making a sword. I have a character that I'm going to write more about. She uses 2 short swords in her combat. And I looked online, and nobody makes swords like that, like the ones she uses. I mocked them up, and I used them against other weapons such as swords, spears, and what have you. And this, the way these swords work is really, really cool. I love it. But nobody makes them. So I had to go there, and she makes her own sword. So I had to go and make a sword to describe. I suppose, yes, that's research, isn't it?
Right. So I guess, is there, I mean, especially when you're on a limited budget, is there value to maybe traveling to a place where you may want to set the story? I think there is. I mean, I think there's a lot you can do online. But I find it admirable that you wrote something, you're like, oh, this is trash or rubbish, as you say, and you went to the location, right? Which I think is great.
Where are we now? Let me see if I can send you a picture of the Callanish stones, because it is the, oh, hang on, don't know. Oh, good grief, this could take a, have you got a minute? I need to find.
Got about 20-30 minutes left or so.
Okay, right. Photos 2023 Callanish. Oh my goodness, I've got hundreds of photographs of Callanish. Let me send you this one. Can I copy and paste, or do I actually have to send the file?
Yeah, you may be able to copy and paste with the way they do the thing now.
I can try, can't I? Or is it possible to share the screen?
Yeah, hold up. Yes, it is. I'm sorry, Gary. I haven't done Zoom in so long, I forget. Let me
No,
do
there-
sharing options, all participants, multiple participants. Wait. Okay, I think you should be able to share. You would just click on that green button in the middle that says
Oh,
share.
hang on. No, I've managed. I have done a copy and paste. There's a.
Oh, okay, because yeah, if you want to do that, okay, here we go. Wait.
Yeah, that worked.
Oh,
In fact,
why is it showing up? It's not showing up. Oh, here we go. It's just a little laggy. Okay.
Right. So you can see that, going there.
Is that okay? Oh, I'm gonna share the screen with the YouTube stream so they can see what. So what was the name of this place again, Gary?
Callanish. That's it. Yeah, the Callanish stones, and I can't remember. I think they're about 7,000 years. Yeah, 7,000 years old. Of course, nobody has a clue what they were about. They actually look like a Christian cross, but this was yonks before Christianity. So it's like 5,000 years before Christianity. So when you see a Scottish cross, it looks like a Christian cross. It has a circle at the cross point. It's a very ancient symbol, adopted by Christianity.
I was gonna say, I think they may have adopted it. Or appropriated it.
Anyway, yes. So yes, you can do a huge amount on YouTube, and I would say that's a primary resource for writers now, because you can go and see, you can you get all the sensory stuff. For instance, if you're looking at someone rock climbing, you can feel what they're doing and then transfer that to the page. There are things I completely don't understand, like sailing. I don't know how it's done. I've never sailed a boat. Well, I did once. It didn't end well. So I don't write about those things. But
Do you
yeah,
ever, Gary, when you don't, do you ever, because I also teach, because I've done this myself, where I've talked to other people that are experienced, like prison guards, for example, or people who have been to prison. do you ever hinge on other quote unquote experts to help you with your writing, or do you just write about experiences? Not just, but do you mainly focus on what you've lived and what you know?
I have on occasions been outrageously arrogant and phoned up, like the dean of a university and sort of bombarded them with questions over the phone. It's surprising just how many people are really happy to give you lots of information. Yes, and also when you can be inspired by, for instance, seeing how on YouTube how mining. I was looking at slate mining. So I went to Wales and went into the slate mines. I mean, it's scary. People worked there in the dark. And yes, you get, I would say, 80% of it from YouTube. And that's enough to write about it. Actually going there gives you, it gives you more. It adds authority to your writing, certainly.
And there's something to be said for feeling the environment and tasting the air and touching the structures. And even if you don't use all that information, like you say, it gives you more authority,
It really comes out in someone's writing if they know what, if the writer is absolutely immersed in that. I mean, if you read Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote Sherlock Holmes, he also wrote The White Company and Sir Nigel, which are set in medieval times. He more or less lived in a place called the Wallace Collection in London for months, and the British Library, just reading medieval he was so immersed in it. It's quite extraordinary. And he wrote these books, and you are absolutely there in medieval Britain and France at war. You can just feel the authority coming from that degree of immersion. In the same way as if you look at Tolkien, he was there in Middle Earth and all the other places. Where was I going with that? Was I answering your question?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, there's something to be said for book research too. We still have a thriving library. The Harold Washington Library has great collections. They have encyclopedias, how-to books, things like that. But I do agree that YouTube, and I hate to say, sometimes even just Googling things does give you the information quickly, and so you can get enough so that you can move forward. But but there's also something to be said, I think, for still traveling, talking to people, reading books. There does have to be a cutoff point eventually. I know people can get into the quagmire of research for too long, and I don't know what the magic bullet is. I think 3 months is it for me. Like, okay, once you got past 3 months, you're good. Because it's very easy to. I mean, I've known writers that published their works that spent almost a decade researching history and original manuscripts, and it's a lot. To work for 10 years on a book is a long time, because about 10% of that's going to go into the actual book. You know what I'm saying? I would say. Maybe, but
talking to people is really good. You see, what this is a gem. What makes a situation real? For instance, I mean, it could be a spaceship, it could be riding a dragon, it could be anything you want. What makes it real is things that don't work. So if you're talking to a surgeon, for instance, or you're writing about surgery, it's not the wonderful surgery that's going on. It's like the blade that won't fit on the scalpel. It's the rubber gloves that rip. It's the mask that steams up your glasses. It's the taps that you can't switch on and off. Do you see what I mean? That really adds reality and immersion for a reader, because things that don't work are so believable.
Right. Yeah, I was because I was reading your novel, Muppy College, that you published your Fire Dance, and I was wondering, I'm like, did Gary research plumbing, or does he know plumbing? But obviously you had to know what was going on, but you're right, when the pipes break, that's what makes that book so interesting. Not the fact that the main character can fix the pipes, you know what I mean? I think when things go, I mean, this also, we've been talking about conflict, struggle, and resolution. And that is a conflict to move the story forward, but I think you're right, think when things don't work that engage the reader, right? Or when something falls apart, that engages them, you know? Have you seen, like, on a total random, we just watched, what was the name of that episode? Do you remember?
Across the sea or something.
Across the Sea, we were watching this Black Mirror episode. And it's when things start to fall apart, when somebody dies, right? It really, really moves the plot forward and then, you know, puts the characters at odds with each other. But that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. That's really true. Anybody else, Mario Mijo or somebody else have other questions or,
My question was, does he like identify specifically a short story writer or a story writer, or does he like also branch off into poetry,
Ooh,
screenwriting, playwriting, things of that nature?
he wants to know if you identify primarily as a short story writer, or do you spin off into screenwriting or other kinds of writing, poetry perhaps?
I have written some poetry. It's not a big thing for me. Poetry is a beautiful tool. I suppose my favorite poet would be Omar Khayyam, but I hate some of the Victorian, somewhat flowery translations. I like the way if you get a literal translation of Khayyam, the way he speaks so bluntly, and he uses one stanza. That's the entire poem is one stanza, and it's about one specific thing. And you know, I do write poetry, and that and I've actually included it in some stories. I'm going to retitle one of my books from one poem in that book. Yes, so I do write poetry. I wouldn't say it's brilliant poetry. It's not brilliant poetry. But if you can write poetry, it's like distilled writing. It's intense, and it really makes the reader feel or see something that they haven't seen before, or in the same thing but in a different way. Yeah, I have huge admiration for poets that can do that sort of thing. Screenwriting, interesting. The book that I'm editing now is, oddly enough, the first book I ever wrote. It's never been published, but it's, you know, it's about to be published now. I'm rewriting it. It's a film. Oddly enough, it would be an extremely low budget film to make because there's virtually no scenery. But it's really weird at the same time. Yeah, I suspect if there were ever going to be a film made of anything I wrote, it would be this, because it's more or less a film already. It's such a visual situation of people working in trenches, which are like, oh, you work in yards, don't you? Oh my goodness. Trenches maybe 60 feet deep by 30 feet wide or 50 feet wide, something like that. Yeah, so there's zigzag trenches, and Actually, that's one of the best bits of scene setting I've ever written. Oh, do you want to hear it? I'll see if I can find it. If I can get. All right, where are we now? What am I looking for? I'm looking for. I need a unique word, don't I? Just talk amongst yourselves for a minute.
Yeah, I had a really great question and it just escaped. And maybe it'll come back. It was about genres, poetry.
Sorry,
No, I had a question that I thought would be useful and it just kind of completely evaporated.
oh, right. Well, it'll come back. It'll come back.
So research.
No, I can't. It'll have to come back to me in some other way. But well, maybe if we meet up again, I'll be able to read it through. But yes, do you have, and do any of you have anything you would like to send to me for me to look over? Because I would be delighted to do so.
And so he also said by varying degrees, he doesn't have to go full on editor if you just want general feedback. He said if you're strong, you want that.
No, I promise to be gentle. I'll make very gentle suggestions. I won't be wicked. I'll tell you what though, I do have the beginning of that book. It's the hardest opening I've ever had to deal with. I'll show you why. Hang on, let me just put a mark on there so I know where I am. Okay. Right, so actually I could do with feedback on this myself. Here we go. Tori welcomes the numbing cold, her thin limbs growing lifeless. Sleep beckons at last, a sleep from which she hopes never to wake. She hadn't expected to die so soon, or so easily, but assumed death would come in the lethal and unexplored desert to which she's headed. Sprawled across boxes and barrels over which she'd thrown herself 3 hours before, the retaining force locking cargo to the transport lifter pulls her against ankles of hard resin and rough wood. Tori's held as she landed, unable to move. Solid rock flashes past. Behind her lies the life she's fleeing, bullying and humiliation. No more struggling to stay awake, terrified of attacks with sticks, glue, needles, or whatever new torture the dominant girls in her company home invent. Ahead lies a legend. The trenches, the source of dramatic media headlines, the most dangerous place on earth, and an entire shift dead in a single day. Flickering viridian light illuminating the moving cave fades. Passing rock slows. A bright lamp almost blinds her. The air warms around Tori, bringing with it smells of leather, sweat, and sewage. Anonymous voices, calls, and commands echo from distant walls. Hey, Sharp, we've got a recruit. Switch the lifter off so she can move. Get the cable, Lynn. I'm talking to you. Stop looking at my stuff and do some work. Tori peers through a gap in her hair. A thin woman with bouncing strides approaches. The woman pulls long scarlet and gold curls into a ponytail. Her red overalls rustle as she squats by the lifter and clicks a button on its side. The lifter, a flat white rectangle piled with cargo, sinks as the retaining field shuts down. Too exhausted and aching to stop herself, Tori tumbles to the gritty floor, bringing boxes crashing down around her. She chokes in billowing dust. Someone steps over her and pulls a cable from the lifter, dragging it over the trampled desert dust. A voice calls, "All right, comms on. Why are all the headsets angled?" Tori shifts as grit digs into her face. She thinks, "I'm really here, in the trenches. I can hardly feel my arms and legs. I'm free. Not long now." She tries to rise, but something hard digs into the heel of the palm. Shifting, she sees the object gleaming in the dust, disturbed by fallen boxes. A silver disc, embossed with pictures and words. Studying it to divert her mind from the agony of returning circulation, she thinks, it's metal. Why do they just leave it lying around? Is there that much here? What do $1 and 2476 mean? Tori pushes it into a pocket of her tattered trousers and rolls the study people gathering around the console of grey desks and shelves. Trenches. She quails, thinking, they look so strong, and I can't even get up yet. Will they let me stay or just send me back? Oh no. They all have weapons and look so tough. Why don't I come here? This is stupid. Patterns of swept grit lie over the colours floor. Dull, waxy walls curve to a lofty ceiling, stretching into the distance and eventually shrouded in darkness. A bank of simple partitions, hammocks and shelves lines one side of the cavern. In the centre stands a row of bulky grey cupboards and storage units. The other wall supports equipment racks and dispensers. A square entrance labelled South cuts through it. A little girl, also dressed in red overalls, stands near Tori and stares at her, thumb in mouth. A graceful woman with glittering gold hair and skin approaches, her armoured boots crunching on the grit. In an exotic island country's accent, the woman says to the girl, it's strange, I know, accident, I think, but stop looking at her hair. Tick, she can't help it. The woman pauses to attach a curved sword and scabbard to her belt. Tick pushes a hand between the woman's overalled legs and cuddles her thigh. Yes, Sil, Tick says. You're so cheeky. Call me Mum. Where are we? How did, any feedback on that?
It
What's your
seems almost
comments?
dystopian to me, but I mean, because it's definitely a unique world. I'm sorry, enough of me. What do you guys think about that? I apologize. They're pondering.
Pondering, right. So we've got a girl who wants to die in a completely bizarre environment. So you've got to get this girl and her wish to die and the new environment. And the next 2 or 3 paragraphs are really hard work for the writer, because she's then where are we now? Let me see if I can read. Oh, come here, you. Okay. Here we go. Tori tries to learn names as she listens to the trenches talking between calls. So the tall one with short hair and low soft voice is Eve. The elegant one is Sil. Is that little girl her daughter? Why did she bring a child into such danger? The short silver-haired one they're calling Sharp. She looks angry. The one with the red hair they call Lynn. She looks pretty, but cruel and mean. So the reader is given a suicidal girl as the main character. The reader's then dumped into this totally unique world, and the reader has to get to know everyone there quickly. So I had to use Tori's head and her internal dialogue to start describing the people and putting names to them to make it easy for the reader. That's what you've got to do. No matter how hard it is to write, it's got to be easy to read. Unless you want to write literary fiction, in which case...
I do have a question that the students have grappled with, and when you write a story, how do you determine what point of view and verb tense to use? Do you sometimes shift that after you started writing, or you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you decide whether you're going to use first person or third person, whether you're going to write in like the present or past tense or whatever tense you prefer? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Present tense, first person, makes for intense reading, and because you're in someone's head, and many writers, including myself, will go from one head to another. Currently, people are against what's called head hopping. So there's a fashion, it's a fashion, right, against moving from one head to another, because apparently that's bad writing. So that means Virginia Woolf, Mervyn Peake, Shakespeare, they're all bad writers. So, you know, don't do that nonsense. Don't believe that stuff. How do I choose them? I like first person and present tense for its intensity, and also because you can lie. Okay. In third person, you can't lie. You as the narrator can only tell the truth. This
Reliable narrator, which I was just thinking, psychic.
sorry.
What if it's an unreliable narrator?
Yes, that's right. You can be totally unreliable because you're the character and you don't know anything, and you make the wrong assumptions. Not only that, but in this book there is an absolutely terrible lie that you know, someone turns up out of the blue, which is impossible, and this is not explained, and the nature of that person is exactly opposite to what everyone else thinks. And I had to carry that for, I think, you know, maybe 10,000 words. So although it's, you know, I had to have first person in order to lie to the reader about that. Past tense is great. Third person is great. I don't know, you know, one's not better than another. If you read some of my short stories, there's first person, third person. I break the fourth wall. I bring the reader into the story as a character. You're a writer and you have a point to make. Just choose whatever tools you need to make that point the best way you can. And if that's third person, you know, or even, you know, second person, as you know, in terms of letters, dialogue, emails, that sort of thing, whatever works.
Yeah, I know it's tough. What I told students is write it one way and then shift it and see which one you like better. Because to me, first person present tense is more active and moves faster in some ways. But then, like right now, I'm currently reading, this is like the fourth or fifth novel, I think his best work yet. It's third person past tense, and it is omniscient, but it focuses, I mean, to me, it's not a problem. And to say that, you know, come on now, I just read The Last Cabin on Earth. And this writer who's Tremblay does shift from perspective to perspective. The writing is brilliant. And he's very unapologetic about it, doesn't always have transitions even. And you're like, oh, okay, now we're looking at the point of view from somebody else and describing what's happening. And we'll sometimes retell the same scene from another character's point of view, which hasn't been done traditionally in a lot of books, but is becoming more something I'm seeing in the current novels I'm reading in horror. But I don't know. I don't know that you can say that that's necessarily bad writing, you know?
I don't think it is bad. If it's, you know, if it works, you know, it's good. If you look at, you know, if you've read, say, Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, she set out to break as many rules as she could. And, you know, people like that, I mean, that's what artists do. They break
Right.
rules. And she was a, you know, literally a bull in a china shop. So one minute you're a woman in a carriage, and then she looks over at someone in a park, and you're in his head, and then you're in a room near the park committing suicide, and then you're a doctor running upstairs saying, oh yeah, so he's dead, but it's nobody's fault. And I mean, it's brilliantly done. Mrs. Dalloway is not a fun book to read. You know, it's not a story as such. It's an exercise in saying, look, you do not need rules. You can write without them. It's fine. Stephen Godden, the author I mentioned, Tales of the Shonry, he said to me, Gary, there are no rules in writing, none whatsoever. There are a lot of things you can get horribly wrong, though.
That's awesome. All right, well,
Yeah.
we're at 3 minutes. This has been great, and the offer is good. If you want to send Gary some of his work, and give us his email, you know.
I promise to be gentle, and I would, you know, I would love to look at your works. So you know, it's not like it's going to be hard work for me or onerous. You know, I look forward to that sort of thing.
Right, and especially since your Mitchell portfolios are coming up in July 7th. They're not complete done with their stories, but you know, I mean, I would take advantage in a good way, right?
Yeah, go.
Can't thank you enough. Anybody have any parting shots or ideas? No? Thank you so much. Go ahead.
I just want to say for doing this.
He's so one of our students is saying thank you. Let's show him some love. I know with the mic.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Well,
Thank you for joining, Chloe.
Chloe, are you writing romance for your story?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I would love to read it. Yes. So,
Oh, okay.
So, you know, any of you want me to look over something, I'd be delighted to do so.
Okay.
And it's been great fun. And thank you so much for inviting me. I've had a wonderful time.
You're being so shy, Gary, but you know what? That's okay. Listen, this is what I vote, or what I propose is that Gary give us his contact info. If you want, I can send him your work via Facebook Messenger or whatever. Mario says he's down. Mario, is that you said you were down for it? Mario says he would love to.
I'll take it too.
And so we'll.
Oh, great.
Me too.
Chloe, you too.
One thing you could do as writers is go and join the Inner Circle Writers Group, an online writers group. Not only can you get some support there, although it's not really about support, but you can socialize with other writers, and that's really a cool thing to do. And these are nice people. How do I put it? Yeah, it's not one of those places where people are fighting.
No, and there are no big egos in that group either. I'm a member of it too. But do you want to give us what's your preference? How should we talk? Do you want to give us your email, or do you want me to send?
Yeah. Here we go. I need to type it in, don't I? Okay.
Talking on Facebook. And I can post it in the bright space.
Let me. Okay, that looks fine. Yep. There you go.
Here we go. So it's garybond.writer@gmail.com.
That's right. Yeah.
How did I do this? Did you get that? Everybody write that? Miho, did you write that down, Miho?
That's a question.
And they've been so brilliant. They have their own little group chat going amongst themselves. Chloe, you got this one too, Miha? All right, beautiful. All right, somebody get it down for me because I closed down the portal. Hey, listen, this has been great. I look forward to my students having a conversation with you about their work. And thank you, Gary. This has been amazing. You were our first guest for the summer term. We're like halfway done, you know, so this has been great. Yeah, have an amazing day. I'm at time, I'm keeping the students over a little bit, but I'll reach out to you so we can talk about our stuff. Have a good one, Gary. Take care.